On May 7, 2021, one of America's largest fuel pipeline companies was forced to shut down its entire pipeline operation. The company was called Colonial Pipeline. Colonial operated more than 5,500 miles of pipelines, moving fuel from refineries in the southern United States to cities and airports across the East Coast. Gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and other petroleum products. According to Colonial's CEO, the company carried nearly half of the fuel consumed on the East Coast. So when Colonial stopped, the effects could spread far beyond the company itself. But the pipeline hadn't been damaged. There wasn't a shortage of fuel at the source. The reason was a cyber attack. A few days earlier, attackers had found a way into Colonial's internal network. On April 29th, investigators later identified the earliest evidence of the attackers inside the company's systems. They used the username and password of an old employee account to access Colonial's network remotely. The account was no longer supposed to be in use, but it was still active. The account only required a password. There was no second step to verify the user's identity. So, if someone had the username and password, they could get in. But how did the attackers get the password? Investigators later found that the password used for the Colonial account had also been used on another website. That website had been compromised, and user information from it had been exposed online. What investigators established was that the same password had been used on another service, and that service had been breached. The attackers were now inside Colonial's network. The group behind the attack was known as DarkSide. They had built a business model around online extortion. One part of the operation developed the ransomware and provided the tools needed for attacks. Other criminals could use those tools to attack companies. Then, the money taken from victims was divided between them. Now, they were inside the network of a company moving a huge share of the East Coast's fuel. Then, on the morning of May 7th, Colonial employees discovered that something had gone wrong. Their computer systems were showing a ransom message. The attackers had gained access to the company's systems and were demanding money in exchange for restoring access. Colonial now had to decide what to do. But the company had no idea yet how far the consequences of that decision would reach. And the attackers also took some information out of the network. Then they sent Colonial a ransom demand. They wanted about 75 bitcoins. But the problem wasn't just the company's computers. Colonial had to make sure the attack didn't spread any further through its systems. So the company made a decision that would affect the entire East Coast. It shut down the pipeline. At around 5:55 in the morning, Colonial employees began shutting down the system. About 15 minutes later, at 6:10, all 5,500 miles of the pipeline had been shut down. The network had around 260 delivery points across 13 states and Washington, D.C. The FBI and CISA later said there was no indication that the ransomware had directly affected the systems controlling the physical operation of the pipeline. The attack had started in Colonial's computer network, but the company shut down the pipeline to contain the incident and prevent the malware from spreading further. Colonial moved more than 100 million gallons of fuel every day: gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and other petroleum products. Its pipelines carried that fuel from refineries to cities and airports across the East Coast. News of the attack spread across the country. People knew that Colonial supplied a huge share of the fuel used along the East Coast. Fears of a shortage started growing. Some people began buying more gasoline than they actually needed. Lines formed at gas stations, and in some areas, stations really did run out of fuel. The U.S. government stepped in as well. The attackers were inside its network. The pipeline was shut down, and DarkSide wanted 75 bitcoins. At the time, that ransom was worth about $4.3 million. Colonial had a decision to make. Could the company restore its systems without paying? Or should it send the money and hope the hackers actually gave them back access? Colonial CEO Joseph Blount later told Congress that the company was in contact with law enforcement before making the payment. In the end, Colonial decided to pay. On May 8th, the company sent about 75 bitcoins to the attackers. The payment was worth roughly $4.3 million at the time, but there was something the attackers had overlooked. They wanted to be paid in Bitcoin because they believed digital money would make the payment harder to trace. But Bitcoin has a problem for criminals. Most Bitcoin transactions are recorded on a public ledger. That meant the FBI didn't have to guess where the money went. They could follow it. But before the FBI went after the money, something else happened to DarkSide. The pressure on the group exploded after the Colonial attack. Investigators found that about 63.7 bitcoins from the ransom had eventually been transferred to a specific Bitcoin address. But finding the wallet address wasn't enough. To move Bitcoin from a wallet, you need something called a private key. In simple terms, you can think of it as the master password for a digital wallet. Whoever has that key can move the Bitcoin stored in that wallet. The FBI said it had obtained the private key for that wallet, but the public court documents do not explain exactly how investigators got it. What they officially confirmed was that the FBI had access to the private key and, with a court-authorized seizure warrant, took control of about 63.7 bitcoins. On June 7, 2021, the Department of Justice announced the seizure. A few days later, DarkSide said that parts of its infrastructure had been taken offline, but exactly who took that infrastructure down was never fully established in public. The company began restoring its systems with help from government agencies and outside specialists. On May 12th, Colonial announced that it had begun bringing its systems back online. The next day, May 13th, fuel started moving through the pipeline again. After almost 5 days offline, Colonial was operating again, but the attack had already shown something much bigger. A criminal group had managed to shut down one of America's most important fuel networks without physically damaging the pipeline itself. And even though the FBI recovered a large part of the ransom, no one from the main group responsible for the Colonial attack was publicly arrested and identified in connection with that attack. DarkSide itself also disappeared from the scene after the attack. But this wasn't the end of ransomware. Other criminal groups were already waiting to take its place. There was another part of the Colonial attack as well, the information taken from the company. DarkSide claimed that, in addition to locking Colonial's data, it had also taken information from the company's network. The group released samples as proof of its claim. But there is no reliable evidence showing that Colonial's stolen information was later sold in a specific transaction. But the Colonial story revealed something else. A company could be worth billions of dollars. It could operate thousands of miles of critical infrastructure, and it could spend years investing in security. Yet an old employee account that was no longer supposed to be in use could still become the way attackers got inside. Colonial eventually restarted its pipeline. A large part of the ransom was recovered by the FBI, and DarkSide could no longer operate in the same way. Do you think Colonial should have paid the ransom? Tell me in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, subscribe. You don't want to miss the next case.